In the same way, Christ did not take on himself the glory of becoming a high priest, but God said to him, "You are my son. Today I have become your father." And he says in another place, "You are priest forever in the order of Melchizedek." Hebrews 5:5. Greetings, mortals, and a capital day to you all. My name is Simeon, and you are watching the Library of Gnosis. In the Hebrew Bible, Melchizedek, king of righteousness, my king is righteousness, or my king is Zedek, was the king of Salem and priest of Elyon. He is first mentioned in Genesis 14:18, where he brings out bread and wine and then blesses Abram and Elyon, or the Lord God Most High. Abram was returning from pursuing the kings who came from the east and gave him a tenth of everything. In Christianity, according to the Epistle to the Hebrews, Jesus Christ is identified as high priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. And so Jesus assumes the role of high priest once and for all. The narrative of Genesis 14 is a part of the larger story telling how Abram returned from defeating King Chedorlaomer and meets with Bera, the king of Sodom, at which point, and Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. And he is, the priest of the Most High God. He blessed him and said, "Blessed be Abram to the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be the Most High God, which hath delivered thine enemies into thy hand." And he gave him tithe from all. Genesis 14:18. Genesis 14:18 introduces Melchizedek, a priest of the Most High God, Elyon, a term which is reused in Genesis 14:19 and Genesis 14:22. The term Most High is used another 20 times to refer to the God of Israel in the Psalms. Giorgio Levi della Vida, 1944, suspects that this is a late development, and Joseph Fitzmyer, 1962, connects Genesis 14 with the mention of a god called Elyon, or the Most High, who may appear according to one of three possible translations of a 750 BCE inscription found at Al-Safira in Syria. Remy Lack, 1962, considers that the Genesis verses were taken over by Jewish redactors, for whom El was already identified with Yahweh. Elyon became an epithet for the God of Israel. When Elyon gave the nations their inheritance, when he divided all the sons of man, he set the boundaries of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God. For Yahweh's portion was his people. Jacob was the lot of his inheritance. Deuteronomy 32:8. But, as we can see in this verse, Elyon is mentioned as being a different God from Yahweh, even mentioned as higher ranking than Yahweh, as he is dividing the land amongst the sons of God. Yahweh being one of them. In these verses, Yahweh is seen as subservient to him, even being so low ranking in comparison that he gets a people without a land. Due to an ambiguity in the Hebrew text, it is unclear who gave the tithe to whom. Abram to Melchizedek, or Melchizedek to Abram. The verse in question states simply, "And he gave him tithe from all." Most translations of this verse preserve the ambiguity. He gave to him. But some modern translations make explicit the mainstream interpretation of Abraham being the giver and Melchizedek the recipient. Rabbi Meir Shmishra of Dvinsk interprets the phrase, "and he gave him tithe from all," as a verbal continuation of Melchizedek's speech, i.e. Melchizedek exclaimed that God had chosen to gift Abram a tenth of God's possessions of the entire human race, consisting of 70 nations as described in Genesis, in the form of the 7 nations of the land of Canaan, including the cities of Sodom that Abram succeeded in saving. Rabbi Meir argues that continued speech of this sort was a common form of prophetic expression. The second and final Hebrew Bible mention of Melchizedek is in Psalm 110:4. The many translations that follow the Septuagint translate it as, "The Lord has sworn and will not repent. Thou art a priest forever after the manner of Melchizedek." EPS 1917. Josephus refers to Melchizedek as a Canaanite chief in War of the Jews, but as a priest in Antiquities of the Jews. Philo identifies Melchizedek with the Logos as priest of God, and honored as an untutored priesthood. The second book of Enoch, also called Slavonic Enoch, is apparently a Jewish sectarian work of the 1st century AD. The last section of the work, the Exaltation of Melchizedek, tells how Melchizedek was born of a virgin, Sophonim or Sophanima, the wife of Ner, a brother of Noah. The child came out of his mother after she had died, and sat on the bed beside her corpse, already physically developed, clothed, speaking and blessing the Lord, and marked with the badge of priesthood. 40 days later, Melchizedek was taken by the archangel Gabriel, Michael in some manuscripts, to the Garden of Eden, and was thus preserved from the deluge without having to be in Noah's Ark. The story of Melchizedek is a short pseudographon composed in Greek in the first 3 centuries AD, probably in a Jewish milieu. Among the Dead Sea Scrolls, 11Q13 is a fragment of a text dated to the end of the 2nd or start of the 1st century BC about Melchizedek, found at Qumran in the West Bank and part of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Melchizedek is seen as a divine being in the text and is referred to as El or Elohim, titles usually reserved for God or the gods. According to the text, Melchizedek will proclaim the Day of Atonement, and he will atone for the people who are predestined to him. He also will judge the people. The Genesis Apocryphal repeats information from Genesis. The Qumran scrolls also indicate that Melchizedek was used as a name of the archangel Michael, interpreted as a heavenly priest. Michael as Melchizedek contrasts with Belial, who is given the name of Melchizedek, king of wickedness. The text of the Epistle to the Hebrews follows this interpretation in stating explicitly that the name in the Greek translation means king of righteousness. Omitting translations of possessive suffix, the same passage interprets Melchizedek's title of king of Salem as translating to king of peace. The context being the presentation of Melchizedek as an eternal priesthood associated with Jesus Christ. Made like unto the Son of God abideth a priest continually, records that he was preceded in priesthood, Kehuna, by Adam. Rabbinic commentaries to the Torah explain that Melchizedek, sometimes associated with Shem, was given the priesthood, Hebrew, Kehuna, by receipt of his father's Noah's blessing. God beatified Japheth and will dwell in the house of Shem, i.e., he will merit to serve and host God as a Cohen. Torah law requires that the Cohen, priest, must be a patrilineal descendant of a prior Cohen. Leviticus Rabbah mentions that God intended to permanently bring forth the priesthood, Kehuna, through Melchizedek's patrilineal descendants. But since Melchizedek preceded Abram's blessing to that of God, God instead chose to bring the priesthood, Kehuna, forth from Abram's descendants. As the text states in the regard of Melchizedek, and he is a Cohen, meaning himself in the exclusive sense, and not in his patrilineal descendants. The Or HaChaim commentary presents that God was not angered by Melchizedek's preceding Abram's blessing to that of God, since Abram was rightfully deemed worthy of precedence for independently coming to recognize God amidst a world full of paganism. But Melchizedek willingly gave the priesthood to Abram upon recognizing his outstanding uniqueness and godly character traits. Rabbinic authorities differ as to whether Kehuna was given to Abram there and then, or after the demise of Melchizedek. The Midrash records that Shem functioned as Kohen Gadol, high priest, in that he taught Torah to the patriarchs before it was publicly given at Mount Sinai, while the official title of high priest was conferred upon Aaron after the erection of the tabernacle. The Midrash quotes multiple aspects of both Melchizedek and Abram. The rabbis taught that Melchizedek acted as a priest and handed down Adam's robes to Abram. Numbers Rabbah 4:8. Rabbi Elazar said that Melchizedek's school was one of three places where the Holy Spirit, Ruach HaKodesh, manifested himself. Rabbi Judah said in Rabbi Nehorah's name that Melchizedek's blessing yielded prosperity for Abram, Isaac, and Jacob. Genesis Rabbah 43:8. The Zohar finds in Melchizedek, king of Salem, a reference to the king who rules with complete sovereignty. Or according to another explanation, that Melchizedek alludes to the lower world and king of Salem to the upper world. The Zohar's commentary on Genesis 14 cites a Rabbi Yitzchak as saying that it was God who gave tithe to Abram in the form of removing the Hebrew letter he from his throne of glory and presenting it to the soul of Abram for his benefit. The letter he is the letter God added to Abram's name to become Abraham in Genesis. Be merciful unto me, O God, be merciful unto me. For my soul trusteth in thee. Yea, in the shadow of thy wings I will make my refuge, until these calamities be overpast. I will cry unto God Most High, unto God that performeth all things for me. He shall send from heaven, and save me from the reproach of him that would swallow me up. Selah. God shall send forth his mercy and his truth. My soul is among lions, and I lie even among them that are set on fire, even the sons of men, whose teeth are spears and arrows, and their tongue a sharp sword. Be thou exalted, O God, above the heavens. Let thy glory be above all the earth. Psalm 57. Yahweh, Baal, the king of the gods at the time, sort of a Zeus equivalent, and other similar deities were children of El. Yahweh was the God of the Israelites. And while it's possible there were cults worshipping Yahweh earlier, he seems to come into popular worship around the time of Moses, though my understanding is that it is unclear. At some unclear point, the followers of Yahweh appear to have merged Elyon and Yahweh into a single God, more or less, referring to all gods as the plural Elohim, and emerged as monotheists, not merely polytheists who had a single God for their people. When you read an English language Bible and see references to God, this is usually a translation of El, or some other word derived from that name. While when you see the Lord in capital letters, that's usually a translation of Yahweh. By the way, Jesus is referred to as a child of El, not as a child of Yahweh. This might mean that Jesus was sort of a peer to Yahweh, rather than Yahweh's son. Perhaps even one of his brothers. As mentioned, Jesus is also referred to as high priest forever in the order of Melchizedek, who was high priest of Elyon. And concerning that which he said, in this year of Jubilee, each of you shall return to his property, and likewise. And this is the manner of release. Every creditor shall release that which he has lent to his neighbor. He shall not exact it of his neighbor and his brother. For God's release has been proclaimed. And it will be proclaimed at the end of days concerning the captives, as he said, to proclaim liberty to the captives. Its interpretation is that he will assign them to the sons of heaven and to the inheritance of Melchizedek. For he will cast their lot amid the portions of Melchizedek, who will return them there and will proclaim to them liberty, forgiving them the wrongdoings of all their iniquities. And this thing will occur in the first week of the Jubilee that follows the 9 Jubilees. And the Day of Atonement is the end of the 10th Jubilee, when all the sons of light and the men of the lot of Melchizedek will be atoned for. And a statue concerns them to provide them with their rewards. For this is the moment of the year of grace for Melchizedek. And he will, by his strength, judge the holy ones of God, execution judgment, as it is written concerning him in the Songs of David, who said, Elohim has taken his place in the divine council. In the midst of the gods he holds judgment. And it was concerning him that he said, Let the assembly of the peoples return to the height above them. God, will judge the people. As for that which he said, how long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? Selah. Its interpretation concerns Belial and the spirits of his lot, who rebelled by turning away from the precepts of God too. And Melchizedek will avenge the vengeance of the judgments of God, and he will drag them from the hand of Belial, and from the hand of all the spirits of his lot. And all the gods of justice will come to his aid to attend to the destruction of Belial. And the height is, all the sons of God, this is the day of peace, salvation, concerning which God spoke through Isaiah the prophet, who said, How beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of the messenger who proclaims peace, who brings good news, who proclaims salvation, who says to Zion, Your Elohim reigns. Its interpretation, the mountains are the prophets, and the messenger is the anointed one of the Spirit, concerning whom Daniel said, Until an anointed one, a prince, and he who brings good news, who proclaims salvation. It is concerning him that it is written, to comfort all who mourn, to grant to those who mourn in Zion. To comfort those who mourn, its interpretation, to make them understand all the ages of time. In truth, will turn away from Belial, but the judgments of God, as it is written concerning him, who says to Zion, Your Elohim reigns. Zion is those who uphold the covenant, who turn from walking in the way of the people. And your Elohim is Melchizedek, who will save them from the hand of Belial. As for that which he said, Then you shall send abroad the trumpet in all the land. 11Q13, Nag Hammadi Library. Here Melchizedek seems to take on a similar role to the one of Jesus, forgiving them for their sins, and playing a role in the end times. The name El seems to have its origin in the Phoenician language, and Elyon just means the first light in Phoenician. Melchizedek was the first initiator in the Bible. He initiated Abram, who later took on the name of Abraham. The Apostle Paul said that Melchizedek was without father and without mother, eternal in the heavens. Timothy Hogan suggests that Melchizedek might be a representation of pure consciousness, as it also shares these same attributes. Be strong, O Melchizedek, great high priest of God Most High, for the archons, who are your enemies, made war. You have prevailed over them, and you destroyed your enemies. Nag Hammadi Codices 9:1. Here Melchizedek seems to have a divine revelation, where he realizes that he is an expression of Christ himself. Take notice of the use of the word archon here, which means that some would classify this as a Gnostic text. I am Melchizedek, the priest of God Most High. I know that it is I who am truly the image of the true high priest. Nag Hammadi Library. The challenge comes from Melchizedek, priest of Elyon, and Abram appeared to serve the same God. Melchizedek literally means Sedek is king, and he is called a priest of Elyon and the king of Salem. All three names, Sedek, Elyon, and Shalem, are associated with the gods of the pagan Canaanite pantheon. So even Abram did not worship Yahweh, and we call them Abrahamic faiths after all. After Abram returned from defeating Kedorlaomer and the kings allied with him, the king of Sodom came out to meet him in the valley of Shaveh, that is, the king's valley. Then Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was priest of God Most High, and he blessed Abram, saying, Blessed be Abram by God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, and praise be to God Most High, who delivered your enemies into your hand. Then Abram gave him 1/10 of everything. The king of Sodom said to Abram, Give me the people and keep the goods for yourself. But Abram said to the king of Sodom, With raised hand I have sworn an oath to Yahweh, God Most High, creator of heaven and earth. Genesis 14:17. As Yahweh is a later name, the insertion of the Tetragrammaton, we must conclude, is a later addition by Jewish redactors to try and disguise the fact that Abram swears to the Canaanite god Elyon instead of Yahweh. And Abram said to the king of Sodom, I will stretch out my hand to the Lord, Kyrios, the Most High God, Elyon, who made the heaven and the earth. Genesis 14:22, Septuagint. As the Septuagint does not mention the name of Yahweh, scholars have concluded that the Greek translators must have been looking at an older Hebrew copy that does not include the Tetragrammaton. It is sad to see the original text get redacted by later Jewish scribes for the sake of fitting a narrative. This is actually a very common occurrence in the Old Testament, making it very hard to read properly. Now we are coming to the end of this video. You might have noticed that a figure named Belial is mentioned, but as this video is already long enough, that will be a story for a different day. I want to thank you all for watching. I have gone ahead and made all my videos ad-free on Patreon, which also includes the script with all the sources used. If this would be of interest, then go check it out. Please leave a comment below. They are my favorite part of creating videos. Anyways, I will see you in the next broadcast, mortals.